Whether you're breaking into tech sales as an SDR, maybe you're looking to promote to account executive, or you're an account executive looking to get to that $200,000, $300,000 a year mark, today I want to break down some of the biggest mistakes I've made throughout my entire tech sales career to hopefully give you some guidance, help you avoid some common mistakes, and really put yourself in a position to win at all times. Before we dive in, I've got some really exciting news for the entire channel, and thank you obviously for the support as we're almost at 6,000 subscribers. I've got more details to come, but one ask today, if you don't mind. We are starting a LinkedIn channel, and that's in the description below. We've got many more announcements coming about the full vision here very shortly, but if you have a chance and could hop over and follow that page, that would really help us out and help us continue to grow. So thank you all again. But diving into it, there's so many things I could talk about and so many mistakes that I've made. And, to the things I've talked about earlier in other videos, if you're maybe looking into tech sales or just really starting to get your wits about you, this is such a unique career in the sense that you can read a book, you can do so many things, but there's just such an experiential element of this that you definitely don't want to fail all the time and fail more than your peers as an example. You're just going to have to. Getting into this career, you have to know that there's going to be some discomfort, getting hung up on, doing all of these different things. And I think when you really stick with it long enough and you make those mistakes, you learn more to really just understand what's in your control and what's not. And from there, you just get sharper and sharper over time. I distilled it down to 4 points today, and obviously I could probably write a novel at this point about the mistakes that I've made. But really, I think the biggest thing, and if there's one thing you take away from this, especially if you're early in your career or looking to make a next step, maybe you've been in your seat for about 12 months and you're looking to try and get to the next promotion, I really didn't put as strong of an emphasis on finding top performers right out of the gate. And again, it's not like I neglect, other folks on my team. I work with a lot of great people, and some people have great quarters, some people, have bad quarters. It happens here or there. But I think if there's anything when you get into a tech sales career, when you're trying to build your network, even if you're not in the career yet, really try and find top performers who consistently have outperformed their peers over time. Early on, I wanted to get input from anyone and everyone. I took everyone's opinion very serious, and I would get a tip from this person one day, and then the next day, another colleague would give me a totally different tip. And then next thing I know, I'm on the phone as an SDR, and I'm trying an opener one day, and it doesn't work. And then I feel like I should get advice from someone else, and then I try that, and it doesn't work. And in reality, I just didn't sit down with any one approach long enough to even really test it out, to really get comfortable with it and drive a cold call properly. And so all that to say, it's not like I just find a top performer and I'm only talking to them. It's definitely good to get opinions from other people, but I do think early on, you can really accelerate your career if you are very, very intentional about finding top performers, and you're also very intentional about a lot of the advice, probably 80 to 90% of your advice, especially early on, coming from top performers as opposed to anyone else. It's very tempting to look for the next tip, the next technique, the one thing that worked, or you have a colleague that's maybe not performing super well, but they just tried one thing and they just had a blowout week, but they never have that consistently again and again. It's very tempting, and next thing you know, you're taking inputs from everywhere. You just can't make any progress. So again, if I could go back, the first thing I would do is just absolutely be hardcore focused on the top performers, helping them, learning from them, and really accelerating my career even faster. The second one is really oriented around promotions, and I've been fairly fortunate in the promotion paths in my own career trajectory. Granted, I did have some tech experience before breaking in as an SDR, but I would say early on too, it's very tempting in sales, especially if tech sales is your first sales career, or this is really the first time you're getting in a customer-facing motion. You want to talk, and you think that quantity of time in front of someone is the same as quality, and this applies on multiple fronts. If you're talking to a prospect, sometimes it feels great, as an example in a cold call, if you have a 15-minute cold call. But at the end of the day, if they don't buy your product, they're just another person that rejected you. So you haven't made fundamentally any more progress with someone that speaks to you for 15 minutes versus someone who speaks to you for 3 minutes, but they know exactly what problem you're solving, they know exactly what your product's about, and they have a meaningful conversation and ultimately buy. And I think this also applies more on the leadership front as well. Because especially when you're an SDR, you've started to hit your number, you're looking ahead to that account executive position, you want that next move, you think naturally, and again, it helps, don't get me wrong. It helps if you have a great relationship with leadership across your company, you have a strong internal brand and public perception about your capabilities, your work ethic, and all of these different things. But I see people, especially early on, and I was very guilty of this myself, that it's like, oh, leadership's here at this happy hour, or leadership's here in the office. I should go out of my way to talk to them. And you end up forcing a conversation that makes you look kind of bad because you don't actually have that much, meaningful or anything fun or well thought out to say. And now you're just talking about the weather, you're talking about the football game or whatever it might be. And it might not be a negative, but at the same time, I think, especially the busier and busier I get, the things I remember the most are the people that I talk with that have the highest quality thoughts. They bring me a new insight I haven't thought about before. But I will say, if you're at a casual setting, maybe having that casual conversation is fine. But if you're in a business setting and you feel like, oh, the CRO's here, I need to get in front of them, I need to say something smart. Like oftentimes, what happens is you rush something, you don't think it out, and next thing you know, while you feel like you got FaceTime in front of them, maybe you said something average at best and they don't really remember it, versus if you're actively engaged in a conversation, you pick your right spot, you find something that they truly, maybe have just overlooked because they're not in the trenches every day, and you provide some unique insight. That is way more valuable and way more memorable than just having a conversation and just being in front of them all the time. The third one's a big one for me. And I think to some extent, you got to hear me out, because if you are early in your career, I think some of this is good and necessary, but I took in way too much content, way too many books, way too many online trainings. I've spent, a fair amount on online courses, and they've been good. I pick up nuggets here and there, but I will say at some point, it almost becomes toxic to your ability to just continue progressing. Because naturally, as you get into sales as an SDR or an account executive, you're just gonna have periods where you are doing incredibly well, and then you'll feel like you're on top of the world, and the next month, you don't feel like you're doing anything different, and all of a sudden, it's just not happening. This is just the nature of the career, which makes it so different than many others. However, I found myself maybe about a year to 2 years in, especially that second year, it's like I would have a down month, and I'd still be taking in podcasts. I'd still be reading different books. And again, I would just be changing my approach all the time. I'd be doubting myself because, oh, this LinkedIn person said this, and this book says this, and then this course that I bought says this, and then this YouTube video says this, right? And it's good, but it has its place. And what I would say, if anything, if you take away from this point is, if you're very early on, maybe year 1 or 2, I think taking in as much content, as many books as you can, as many courses where appropriate, it's a good thing. If you find people that are actually adding value, maybe they've sold something similar to you, I think there's a lot of ways you can really quickly improve your skill set. And even in the last 3 to 4 years, when it comes to online, things like YouTube, things like courses, there's a lot of options out there that can really help you progress very quickly. That being said, I think there's a natural point where you'll just be taking in so much that you'll start to realize some people's feedback is actually not relevant, which I think is good. You've got to do a lot of your own education to get to that point where, for instance, on LinkedIn, there's a lot of people I followed that early on were great, but now they've gotten so focused on one specific vertical. They're selling sales tools to salespeople that I'm sure they're great at what they do, but they can't really help me sell a DevOps tool to a hardcore engineer with 15 years of experience. The tactics just don't work. So again, I think early on, first 6 to 12 months, even 18 months, take it all in, but then start to burn off the things that aren't relevant and really start to be very selective, almost very similar to the top performer comment I made earlier. Be very selective about who you take advice from, because at the end of the day, even if the person you're getting information from is like okay and they're not the best person for you, at least you're consistently focused on one train of thought, and you're going to be better able to see which tactics are working and which are not when you're actually trying the same thing over a sustained period of time. Because if you're switching tactic from one day to the next, from 1 week to the next, it's really easy to just start to feel lost because you don't even know or have that solid framework and foundation to even come back to. I could write a novel, so I'll have to cut myself off there, but really getting into the last point as well, I think looking back at my own career as an account executive, the first 2 years I was an AE, I won President's Club, I got an insanely hot start. I was very fortunate to be in that position, but I also put in a lot of work to get there. And I think when I went to the enterprise side, I got way overconfident that I had kind of figured sales out. And I will say, even to me, this is still a learning process for me. Every deal is different, and I'm still supporting deals across many of the different market segments. But I will tell you, if you have had a ton of success as an SMB AE, as a mid-market AE, the enterprise game truly is a different beast. And there's a lot of frameworks, there's a lot of things that do apply, but it is so different that in a strange way, again, it's not like I completely forgot everything I knew and I'm ripping up stuff and starting from scratch. But I will say you take for granted on the SMB and mid-market side how easy things are in the sense that usually if an engineer reaches out at a 500-person startup, you're maybe 2 to 3 levels away from the C-suite, and that's about it. When you get to the enterprise side, you're selling to individual contributors that are 15 levels removed from the C-suite. They have, a director 4 levels above them that has budget. That director gets their yearly budget from a director 4 levels above them. And it gets incredibly complex. You cannot be pigeonholed through one individual. And oftentimes you'll think you're talking to the right person. And when you're getting to organizations of 50 to 100,000 people, there's just so many ways a deal can fall apart. And there's so many unique advantages that you have to put yourself into and just in a completely different way than the SMB, very transactional, 1 to 2 month sales cycle. It's just a completely different beast. So just recapping the 4 biggest mistakes that I've made in my career, I think if I could go back, the biggest thing I would do is just find top performers and attach myself to them. Because I think, again, it's really tempting when you're early on in your career, and I think it's good if you're taking inputs from a lot of people, but start to see the performers that, again, maybe aren't number 1 all the time, every time, because at scale over many years, that's impossible. But the people that are consistently in the top 10% of your organization, the people that are consistently shouted out across the organization for their performance or for something unique that they did, those are the people that you really want to help to get on their radar. Don't just extract information from, but really try to attach yourself, see what they're doing, use tools like Gong, listen to all their calls, do all of these different things to really take consistent feedback from them. And yes, definitely try to extract things from peers or from other folks that are doing okay. But I think you really do yourself an advantage when you latch on to maybe, anywhere from 1 to 5 hardcore top performers versus just feeling like because you know 30 people that give you advice that you're learning a lot. Tied into this point when it comes to your own brand internally, when you're trying to promote, when you're trying to make a deal happen very quickly, it's really easy to get caught up in the fact that quantity of time feels like a good thing, when in reality, and again, there's pros and cons, there's different times and different places you have to pick your spots, but quantity is not the same as quality. And especially when we're talking about a busy C-suite executive like the CRO or a director at a big company, they're not gonna remember the person that's always in front of them and shooting the shit and kind of wasting their time. They're gonna remember the person that consistently, every time they open their mouth, provides really valuable feedback. There may be situations where you can casually at a happy hour have a more casual, non-work focused conversation, but certainly within the context of a 9 to 5 job, when you're in business hours, quantity is not quality. The third point, again, on a personal level, I think it's great in year 1 and 2 to take in a ton of information, but after that, you should take in so much information that you start to understand where maybe people selling to a different industry altogether, or to be honest with you, some low quality content, low quality books don't apply to you. Because if you take in too much information over time, you're just gonna keep feeling compelled to, oh, maybe I didn't perform this week because of this, and now I have to try this, and now I have to try this, and now you just have no foundation, no framework to even feel confident on any call. And again, this is a cycle. Sometimes you're gonna feel great, sometimes you're gonna feel poor, but I think over time, when you're removing information, when you're really focused on a couple of high quality contacts within your organization, those top performers, and then you've found maybe 2 to 3, whether it's books, whether it's influencers or creators that you latch onto that really provide a lot of value, you should over time get to the point where you can recognize when too much content is just a waste of your time. And then lastly, again, let me know if you want me to make an entire video on this, but SMB and mid-market sales, these quick 1 to 3 month deal cycles, maybe a deal size anywhere from $25,000 to $100,000. It's great, and it's a very unique skill, and it takes a lot of skill to do well. But I think the biggest mistake I've made thus far in my career, and it's taken a while to really start to grasp the totality of it, but if you have a lot of success there, stay humble. It does not mean that you're absolutely gonna come in and crush enterprise sales. And again, you very well may come in and absolutely continue the path that you have, but it is such a different beast. And I think going back to all the points I've said earlier, it felt like for me, to be honest, after about 3 years, when I started to transition more to these larger accounts, these enterprise types of sales, it was almost a completely different game altogether. And that's really when I started cutting back on the types of inputs I was getting, both internally and also the types of books I was reading, the types of content I was taking in. It really is a completely different game. So nonetheless, I hope this helps. And if you've made it this far, we'd appreciate it if you check the description for our new LinkedIn presence. Awesome announcements coming down the pipe. Very excited to share with you a lot of things we've been working on for the better part of this entire year. But nonetheless, appreciate it as always, and we'll see you in our next video. Thanks.